I found my daughter's clothes and photos scattered all over the lawn. Her husband was dragging her by the hair, yelling, "Just sign the papers!" My grandson screamed, "Daddy, please don't hurt Mom." I grabbed him, pulled her free, and dialed one number. 30 minutes later, the knock on his door changed everything. Before we continue, if you haven't subscribed yet, do so to stay up to date with the most shocking and real stories happening around you. You ever have one of those days where you think, well, this can't get any crazier? That was me last Saturday. I found my daughter's things scattered all over my front lawn, her husband yelling, my grandson crying, and well, let's just say I was about to find out what I'm really made of. I was just settling in with my morning tea, Earl Grey because I'm fancy like that, when I looked out the window and saw my daughter's purse, shoes, and what looked suspiciously like her favorite casserole dish, all strewn across the grass. Now I don't know about you, but when I see a casserole dish outside, I know something's gone terribly wrong. It was a crisp Saturday morning, the kind where the air feels cleaner than usual, and I was feeling particularly proud of myself for getting up early and not burning the toast. But all that peace vanished. The second I saw Lily's belongings scattered like confetti across the lawn, my stomach dropped. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't have imagined how wrong. I slipped on my slippers and ran out the door without a second thought, and there he was. Brad, my son-in-law, face red as a stoplight, grabbing Lily by the hair and shouting, "Just sign Lily, sign it." She was crying, begging him to stop, and my little grandson, Ethan, only 6 years old, was standing there with tears running down his cheeks, yelling, "Don't hit Mom, I'll be good, I swear to you." That boy's voice broke something inside me. Everything happened in slow motion like one of those awful dreams where you're running, but can't move fast enough, but I moved. I didn't think about my age, my bad knee, or the fact that Brad was twice my size. I just saw my daughter being hurt, and that was enough. I charged across that lawn, faster than I had in 20 years, and shoved him so hard he stumbled backward onto the grass. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking, but I stood between him and my daughter, like a lion protecting her cub. "You lay another finger on her," I said, my voice steady even though my insides were trembling, and "I'll call the police so fast your head will spin." He glared at me, chest heaving, muttering things I won't repeat, but I didn't move an inch. "You think this is your business?" He spat. "It became my business. The second you started yelling at my daughter in my front yard," I snapped, "Now leave before I make it official." He stormed off toward his car, slamming the door so hard the sound echoed down the street and peeled out of the driveway. I didn't even watch him go. I turned to Lily, who had collapsed to her knees, holding Ethan tightly. Her hair was messy, her face streaked with tears, and she looked so small in that moment that my heart ached. I knelt beside her, brushing her hair out of her face, and asked softly, "Honey, what was that about?" She tried to answer, but her voice broke. He wanted me to sign something." She whispered some papers. "He said if I didn't, he'd take Ethan and leave." I could feel anger bubbling up inside me. Hot, sharp, and righteous papers. I asked what kind of papers. She reached into the grass, picked up a crumpled stack, and handed them to me. Divorce papers presigned by him, filled with legal jargon, and a clause that basically said she'd get nothing. No house, no savings, no custody. He wanted her to sign her life away. That's when I pulled out my phone, not to call the police, but to call his mother. If we were going to have a showdown, then the whole family might as well be involved. When she answered, I said, "Debbie, you might want to come get your son before he ends up in jail." There was a pause, then a sigh so heavy it told me everything I needed to know. "What did he do this time?" she asked quietly. I told her everything, and she didn't even sound surprised. "I'll handle it," she said, but I knew she couldn't. Brad had been handled his whole life, and this was the result. A man who thought yelling and control equaled strength. Back inside, I sat Lily down at the kitchen table, made her some tea, and told her, "You're not going back there tonight. You and Ethan are staying here." She nodded weakly, till shaking, while Ethan clung to her arm. "Mom," she said, voice trembling. "He said he'd ruin me if I left." I took her hands in mine and said, "Sweetheart, he can't ruin someone who's already decided to stand up." That night I called my old friend Linda, who happens to be an attorney, and asked for her advice. She didn't hesitate. Don't sign anything, file for a restraining order, and tell her to document everything. I hung up and told Lily exactly that. For the first time all day, I saw a spark of determination in her eyes, the same spark I saw when she was little, and decided to climb the tallest tree in the yard just to prove she could. Later that evening, Debbie showed up, pale and tired-looking. She hugged Lily and said, "I'm sorry, sweetheart. He's been like this since his father left. I wanted to feel sympathy, but all I could think was that my daughter and grandson deserved better than excuses." I told her calmly, "He needs help, but until he gets it, he's not welcome here." She nodded sadly, like she'd known this was coming for a long time. When bedtime came, Ethan insisted on sleeping next to his mom. I peeked in later and saw them curled up together, her arm around him protectively. My heart broke all over again. I went back to the living room, sat in my recliner, and looked out the window. The lawn was quiet now, but I could still see the faint outline of where her things had been scattered earlier. I thought about all the times I told myself not to interfere, not to meddle in her marriage, but standing there that morning, watching my daughter cry while her son begged for it to stop. I realize something sometimes. A mother's place isn't to stay quiet or polite. Sometimes it's to stand up, raise your voice, and make damn sure the people you love know they're not alone. As I finished the last cold sip of tea, sitting forgotten on the table, I promised myself one thing: that man would never hurt my daughter again. He might have thought it was just another argument, another power play, but what he didn't know was that, when he picked a fight on my lawn, he declared war on a mother who had nothing left to lose and everything left to protect. And that morning, under the soft hum of the porch light and the scattered memories of chaos, the lawn showdown truly began. So there we were, all four of us, crammed into my living room like actors in a play nobody wanted to audition for. My daughter sat on the edge of the couch, her hands trembling in her lap, eyes darting around the room, as if she was searching for an escape hatch. My sweet grandson, bless his little heart, was glued to my side, arms wrapped around my waist so tight I could barely breathe. He was sniffling, his face buried in my sweater, and every so often, he'd let out a little hiccup of a sob that just about broke me in two. And then there was my son-in-law, pacing back and forth in front of the fireplace like a caged tiger, his jaw clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. The tension in the room was so thick you could have cut it with a butter knife, though honestly, I was tempted to use something sharper. I kept thinking, is this what they mean by in-laws, because I'm about to call the law? I tried to keep things light, but my nerves were shot. I mean, what do you do in a situation like that? There's no manual for what to do when your daughter's marriage explodes. On your front lawn, I glanced at the clock for what felt like the 100th time. Only 10 minutes had passed since I'd called his parents, but it felt like an eternity. I wondered if they were stuck in traffic, or if maybe they were just as nervous as I was about walking into this mess, trying to break the ice. I cleared my throat and said, "Anyone want cookies? I've got oatmeal raisin. Don't worry. No one likes them, so there's plenty." My daughter managed a weak smile. Bless her, but my grandson just sniffled louder. My son-in-law shot me a look that could have curdled milk. Honestly, you'd think I'd offered him a plate of poison. I almost laughed, but the sound caught in my throat. Humor is my go-to in a crisis, but this was a tough crowd. I sat down next to my daughter and put my arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me just a little, and I could feel her shaking. I wanted to say something comforting, something wise, but all I could manage was, "It's going to be okay, honey. We're here. We'll figure this out." She nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. I remembered when she was a little girl, how she'd come running to me with scraped knees or a broken toy, and I'd always known how to fix it. But this was so much bigger than a Band-Aid or a dab of glue. My grandson looked up at me, his big brown eyes full of fear. "Grandma, is Mommy in trouble?" he whispered. My heart just about shattered. I hugged him tighter and kissed the top of his head. "No, sweetheart, Mommy's not in trouble. We're just having a hard day, that's all. But you're safe here, I promise." He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. Kids are smart. They know when something's wrong, even if you try to hide it. Meanwhile, my son-in-law kept pacing, muttering under his breath. Every so often he'd stop and glare at my daughter, then at me as if daring me to say something. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him to get out of my house and never come back. But I held my tongue. I knew we needed to keep things calm until his parents arrived. Still, I kept my phone within arm's reach, just in case I needed to call the police. I wasn't about to let anything happen to my family under my roof. The minutes dragged on. I tried to distract my grandson by asking him about school, about his favorite cartoons, anything to take his mind off the chaos. He answered in short, quiet sentences, his eyes never leaving his mother. My daughter just stared at the floor, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. I wondered what was going through her mind. Was she blaming herself? Was she scared? Was she thinking about leaving him for good? I wanted to ask, but I didn't want to push her. Not now. Not with him in the room. At one point, my son-in-law stopped pacing and sat down heavily in the armchair across from us. He put his head in his hands and let out a long, shaky breath for a moment. He looked less like a monster and more like a lost little boy. I almost felt sorry for him but then I remembered the way he'd grabbed my daughter, the way he'd yelled at her, and my sympathy evaporated. No one has the right to treat my child that way, no one. I glanced at the clock again. When minutes had passed, still no sign of his parents, I started to worry they wouldn't come at all, that I'd have to handle this on my own. I thought about calling my sister or maybe my neighbor, Carol. She's always up for a little drama, but I didn't want to make things worse. So I just sat there holding my daughter and grandson, praying for strength, for wisdom, for a miracle. Finally, after what felt like forever, I heard a car pull into the driveway. My heart leapt into my throat. I stood up, smoothing my hair and straightening my sweater, trying to look composed. "Okay, everyone," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Let's try to be civil. We're going to get through this together." As I walked to the door, I took a deep breath and said a silent prayer. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for sure. I would do whatever it took to protect my family, no matter what. 30 minutes later, though it felt like 30 years, there was finally a knock at the door. I don't think I've ever moved so fast in my life, not even when the ice cream truck used to come down our street in July. My heart was pounding, my palms were sweaty, and I had to take a deep breath before I opened the door, just to keep myself from bursting into tears or honestly laughter, because sometimes when life gets this ridiculous, you have to laugh or you'll just fall apart. Standing on my porch were my son-in-law's parents, looking like they'd just run a marathon in a thunderstorm. His mother's hair was sticking out in every direction, her purse was hanging off her shoulder by a thread, and she had that wild, wide-eyed low. Okay, that only comes from being woken up by a phone call that starts with, "You need to come over now." His father, on the other hand, looked like he'd just come from a board meeting, shirt tucked in tie straight, but his face was red and his jaw was set. I could tell he was not in the mood for nonsense. They barely said hello before they swept past me into the living room. His mother, bless her heart, went straight to my daughter and wrapped her in a hug, so tight I thought they might both topple over. She whispered something in my daughter's ear, and for the first time all day I saw my daughter's shoulders relax just a little. Sometimes it takes another mother to know exactly what to say, even if it's just a soft, "I'm here." My grandson, still glued to my side, looked up at the new arrivals with wide, uncertain eyes. I gave his hand a squeeze, hoping to reassure him. Meanwhile, his father marched right up to his son, who was still slumped in the armchair, and said in a voice that could freeze boiling water, "What on earth is wrong with you?" There was a long, heavy silence. My son-in-law didn't answer right away. He just stared at the floor, his hands clenched into fists on his knees. I could see the shame and anger warring on his face, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him, almost. Now I know family drama isn't funny, but I had to bite my tongue not to laugh. The whole scene was so surreal, it felt like we were all extras in some weird episode of Dr. Phil. I half expected a camera crew to pop out from behind the curtains, but there was no audience, no commercial break, Just us, stuck in the middle of a mess that none of us had signed up for. We all sat down awkwardly like strangers at a bus stop. My daughter and her mother-in-law sat together on the couch, my grandson curled up between them. My son-in-law's father took the armchair next to his son, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. I perched on the edge of the ottoman, trying to look calm and collected, though inside I was a bundle of nerves. I glanced around. The room, at the family photos on the wall, the half-finished puzzle on the coffee table, the plate of untouched oatmeal raisin cookies, it all felt so normal, and yet nothing was normal at all. Finally, my son-in-law spoke. His voice was low and rough, like he'd been swallowing gravel. "I lost my job," he said, "not looking at anyone a month ago. I didn't tell anyone I thought I could fix it, find something else before anyone noticed, but I couldn't. And then the bills started piling up and I snapped." He looked up at his father, then at his wife. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have taken it out on you, on any of you." There it was, the truth finally out in the open, not an excuse but at least an explanation. I could see the relief and the pain on my daughter's face, the way she wanted to reach out to him but was still too hurt, too scared. His mother squeezed my daughter's hand, tears in her eyes. His father let out a long sigh, the kind that comes from years of disappointment and worry. We started talking, all of us, voices overlapping, sometimes angry, sometimes sad, sometimes just tired. We talked about jobs and money, about stress and fear, about how easy it is to hurt the people you love when you're hurting yourself. My daughter spoke up, her voice shaky but strong. "I love you," she told her husband, "but I can't let you treat me or our son like that. We need help." "You need help." I was so proud of her in that moment, I could have burst. His mother nodded, wiping her eyes. "We'll help you, both of you, but you have to promise this will never happen again." His father, ever the stoic, just said, "You need to get your act together, son, for your family, for yourself." My son-in-law nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I know, I'm sorry. I'll do whatever it takes." It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a start. Sometimes that's all you can hope for. We made a plan right there in my living room. My daughter and grandson would stay with me for a while. Just until things settled down, his parents would help their son get back on his feet. Maybe even find a counselor. We agreed to check in, to talk more. To be honest, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. As the sun started to set, I looked around at all of us, tired, tear-stained, but together I realized that families aren't perfect. We fight, we fall apart, but if we're lucky, we find our way back to each other, and sometimes that's enough. By the end of that long, exhausting day, we'd finally managed to cobble together a plan, one that, if I'm being honest, I never thought I'd have to make for my own family. My daughter and grandson would stay with me for a while, at least until things settled down and everyone could breathe again. I set up the guest room with fresh sheets and fluffed pillows, and even dug out my old teddy bear from the attic. For my grandson, he hugged it like it was a life raft, and I realized that sometimes the smallest comforts can make the biggest difference. My daughter, still a little shaky but determined, helped me fold laundry and make up the bed, and I could see the relief in her eyes, relief that she didn't have to pretend everything was fine. At least not for now. His parents, blessed them, took their son home with them. I could see the weight of the day on their faces as they left, his mother's arm around his shoulders, his father walking a step behind, silent but supportive. They promised to get him the help he needed, counseling, maybe even a support group. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I also knew that sometimes the hardest part is admitting you need help in the first place. As they drove away, I stood on the porch and watched the taillights disappear down the street, feeling a strange mix of sadness, hope, and exhaustion. Inside, my house was quiet. For the first time all day, my daughter sat at the kitchen table, staring into her cup of tea, while my grandson curled up on the couch with his teddy bear and a cartoon on low volume. I busied myself with little things, wiping down counters, straightening up the living room, putting away the untouched plate of oatmeal, raisin cookies, which, let's be honest, were never anyone's favorite anyway. I needed to keep moving, to keep my hands busy, because if I stopped, I knew the tears would come. And sure enough, as I stood at the sink, the weight of everything hit me all at once. I let myself cry just for a minute, letting the fear and anger and relief wash over me. Then I took a deep breath, splashed some cold water on my face, and went back to my family that night after my grandson was tucked in and my daughter was finally asleep. I sat alone in the living room, the house dark except for the soft glow of the lamp. I thought about everything that had happened, the yelling, the fear, the way my heart had nearly stopped when I saw my daughter's things scattered on the lawn. I thought about how quickly life can change, how one moment you're sipping your morning tea and the next you're in the middle of a family crisis you never saw coming. I thought about all the times I doubted myself, as a mother, all the times I'd wondered if I was doing enough, being enough, and I realized something important. You're never too old to be a mama bear. It doesn't matter how grown your children are or how many gray hairs you've got when your family needs you. You find a strength you didn't know you had. You stand up, you speak out, and you do whatever it takes to protect the people you love, even if it means shoving a grown man off your daughter, calling his parents, and turning your living room into a makeshift therapy session, even if it means being the bad guy for a little while, or making tough decisions that break your heart, because that's what mothers do. That's what grandmothers do. We love fiercely. We fight fiercely, and we never ever give up, ladies. If you ever find yourself in a situation like this, don't be afraid to stand up, speak out, and call for backup. Don't let fear or embarrassment keep you from doing what's right, and don't ever think you're alone. There are more of us out here than you think. Women who've faced down storms, who've picked up the pieces, who found the courage to say enough. Sometimes the universe sends you a sign, a casserole dish on the lawn, a child's cry, a moment of clarity in the middle of chaos. When that happens, listen, take action. Trust your instincts. You're stronger than you know. In the days that followed, things slowly started to settle. My daughter and I talked late into the night, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing, always honest. My grandson began to smile again, little by little, and I made sure to fill his days with as much love and normality as I could muster. We baked cookies, chocolate chip. This time, thank goodness, went for walks, and watched old movies under a pile of blankets. My son-in-law called every day, checking in, apologizing, promising to do better. I didn't know what the future would hold for them, but I knew that whatever happened, we'd face it together. Looking back, I realized that day changed all of us. It reminded me that family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when things are messy and hard. It's about loving each other enough to have the tough conversations, to set boundaries, to ask for help. And it's about finding the courage to be a mama bear, no matter how old you are or how scary the situation. So if you're reading this and you're facing your own storm, know that you're not alone. You've got a whole tribe of women behind you, cheering you on, ready to lend a hand or a listening ear. And if you ever see a casserole dish on your lawn, take it as a sign. It's time to take action. So what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Have you ever had a family drama explode? Right on your front lawn? Share your stories in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Thank you for watching this video. Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly value every story and every voice. Don't forget to subscribe to Tears and Strength and share this video with your friends.